Alright, everyone, so we're on to chapter 3. I guess I don't really need to recap. Nothing's really fucking happened. I mean, there was a hostage situation, the reporter was being shitty, because she decided she needed to be part of the hostage situation, and then the squad commander, what is he, Gage Dixon, agreed to do, like, a thing with her. Yeah, chapter 3. Mac took her car to the SWAT compound, leaving Zach and the news van behind on purpose. Really? She wanted to send a clear signal to Dixon that she was agreeing on his terms. No video cameras, no recording devices, no divulging secret tactical procedures. Of course, she had no interest in secret tactical procedures, and wouldn't have printed them regardless. She was after something else entirely. She rolled to a stop outside the gate and turned off the engine. She didn't know what it was yet, but her instincts told her there was a mother of all stories behind that fence. She grabbed her purse, but didn't bother with the monster camera Zach had tossed into the back seat. She still had her trusty little camera tucked in her back pocket, and if Dixon wanted to take it from her, she had her iPhone. Because Dixon is a Neanderthal from the fucking, I don't know, Stone Ages that doesn't know that iPhones have a camera on them. She took a deep breath, relaxed her shoulders, and put on her game face. Sergeant Gage Dixon was no idiot. He knew she was snooping for a story. She had to remember not to underestimate the man simply because he was attractive as all get out. What an awkward. He was attractive as all get out. That's a dumb sentence. And apparently attractive people are dumb. Mac headed for the gate to ring the bell, only to stop when she realized Dixon was already waiting for her. He was standing there in his navy blue uniform, which consisted of military-style pants bloused over combat boots and a skin-tight t-shirt that showed off every muscle he had, and there was a lot of them. You know who I see as Gage Dixon right now? The Rock. Because, well, it's just saw Furious 7, and he was wearing a skin-tight t-shirt. So, yeah, that's Gage Dixon for me right now. She dragged her mind out of the fantasy he was heading for and gave him a smile. Sergeant Dixon, you didn't have to meet me at the gate. You could have just buzzed me in. He opened the door, returning her smile with a devastating grin of his own. Devastating, you guys. What kind of host would I be if I did that? And if we're going to be spending so much time together, maybe you can stop with the formalities and just call me Gage. Maybe this was going to be much easier than she thought. Okay, but only if you call me Mac. It's what all my friends call me. I like the idea of being friends, but if it's all the same to you, I'll like to call you Mackenzie. He grimaced. Mac makes me think of a big, overweight trucker, and you definitely don't fit the image. Mac couldn't help but laugh. He was the first guy who ever told her he wouldn't call her by her nickname. Most guys would call a woman Hannibal Lecter if they thought it'd get them into her panties. Perhaps it was an indication that working Dixon, Gage, was going to take a different approach, not to mention a more subtle touch, she thought as he led her across the parking lot into what he called the training/maintenance building. It had a break room, a classroom, a small gym with basketball hoops, and a few rooms for storing tactical gear and other equipment. What's in there? She asked as they walked past a room that had the door closed. If the door was closed, it was a place she wanted to see, and if you resisted, it meant she really wanted to see it. Gage frowned. Just another gym. He opened the door to reveal a weight room. We had a little accident and some of the mirrors got broken, but we should have it back in shape in a day or so. So much for a room full of these deep, dark secrets you've been hoping for. I guess you guys have to work out a lot, huh? To get all those big muscles, I mean. She figured a guy his size would appreciate a little love his way when it comes to maintaining his physique, but he only chuckled. We work out, but not as much as you think. We stay in shape mostly from the training we do. You know, a lot of carrying, climbing, obstacles, running, carrying heavy gear in each other. When she lifted her brow, he added, to stimulate evacuating a wounded man. The weight room is here to give the guys something to keep their minds occupied between incidents, as well as help deal with the stress afterward. She wasn't sure how much she bought that. Somebody his size needed to work out a lot. Somebody his size needed to work out a lot. But she certainly enjoyed the spoils of his efforts. Gage had a nice body. She could only imagine how much better he'd look with his clothes off. How does she know how much a man needs to work out to be that big? First of all, I have no context for how humongous he is. I'll just assume he's rock big. And I got... Alright, so she's picturing this guy naked. I'm not going to say anything. She immediately berated herself for forgetting why she was there. Focus on the dang story. They ran into four other members of his team as he took her on a tour of the last storage room in the building. The men were packing some kind of gear she didn't recognize, but stopped when she and Gage walked in. Mackenzie, this is Officer Hale Delaney, one of our specialists in less lethal tactics and martial arts. Officer Eric Becker, computers and surveillance. Officer Landry Cooper, explosives and demolitions expert. And Officer Remy Bourgeois, shotgun breach specialist and assistant armorer. They have armorers? Gage glanced at her. Meet Mackenzie Stone from the Dallas Daily Star. Mac already knew their names and their specialties from the personnel files she'd made. She smiled and shook each of their hands, and like the other SWAT cops who'd rescued the hostages that morning, they were all big, tall, and muscular, not to mention easy on the eyes. As Gage led her over to the next building, he gave her a tutorial on how the SWAT team was organized. We have a lot of flexibility when it comes to how we operate, based on the mission, he said. We have two separate squads within the unit. Mike runs one and Xander leads the other. They can operate independently or together as part of a full team. If there's more than one incident at a time, or if a particular mission calls for it, we break the team up into thirds, with me leading the third squad. Do you always run the operation from the vehicle you were in today? She asked as they entered the administrative building. Normally, no. He gave her a wry smile. I try to stay close to the action as I can, but today was a little different because I needed to be there to communicate directly with the on-scene commander and the power company. Plus, we had the department's crisis negotiator there because we were hoping to make a deal with the gunmen and avoid confrontation, but that didn't work. When they got to the main office, he introduced her to Officer Alex Trevino and Max Lowry, two of the team's snipers. It seemed odd to see big strapping men like them sitting at desks filling out forms. Big strapping men. How much cliched language can we possibly fit into this fucking book? SWAT officers doing paperwork? She shook her head. Tell me it isn't so. I wonder how many cops hear that fucking line. Unfortunately, the two men laughed, because it's that funny. Unfortunately, it's the bane of all police work, Gage said. The more actual cop work you do, the more reports you have to fill out. While the admin part of the job might be boring, Mac did see one thing that caught her attention. Next to the office was a room filled with filing cabinets. If there was something interesting to find out here, that'd definitely be the best place to start. And how does she fucking plan to get into this fucking room with the filing cabinets with so many of these guys walking around? Like, I don't even know how many times we've been introduced to these guys that I think there's just like a million fucking dudes in this goddamn compound. She and Gage were heading out to the back door of the building when they passed a set of stairs that led up to the second floor. What's up there? She asked when Gage didn't offer to give her a tour. Gage paused, his hand on the doorknob. Some is storage, but most of it is barrack space. Barrack space? Yeah, you know, showers, a small kitchen, a few bedrooms, in case we have to work late or need to keep a crew here on 24-hour shifts. Oh, it probably didn't look like a room at the Ritz, but she had a sudden urge to see it anyway. Are they going to have sex in that room? Where would men like Gage crash after pulling an all-nighter? Mind if I take a look, just so I can get a feel of how you spend your downtime? He shrugged and gestured up the stairs. After you. Mac was about halfway up the stairs when it occurred to her that Gage might have asked her to go first so he could stare at her ass. She threw a quick glance over her shoulder to check, and was disappointed to see he wasn't even looking. Damn, if she couldn't distract him with her feminine asses, this job might turn out to be tougher than she thought, and it was already tough to begin with. Is that how she got all of her stories? Distracting men with her feminine assets? Hey, if it works, be my guest. Some of us don't use our feminine assets. Shit don't work sometimes. As he said, some of the space upstairs was dedicated to storage, but there was also a small kitchen with a table and some chairs, as well as a large community shower and a large community shower. Okay. And a room with 4 cots that looked as if they would fit in just fine on a military base or a prison. Even the blankets were rough, made of uncomfortable-looking wool. The room also had a wall of gray lockers, Gage explained, held extra uniforms and personal gear. Well, one thing was for sure, no one could accuse SWAT for misappropriating tax dollars for their own comfort. The place was absolutely Spartan. Mac turned to say as much to Gage when she caught sight of the pile of bloody gauze bandages on the counter. Gage must have seen the direction of her gaze because he hurriedly swept them into the trash can with his arm. One of the men got nicked during the hostage rescue, he explained. Martinez, you almost forgotten. Is he okay? Yeah, he's fine. Just a little scratch. One of our medics patched him up. Mac wasn't an expert on scratches, but that had certainly looked like a heck of a lot of blood for a scratch. She wished she could swipe one of those bloody bandages so she could get it tested, but there wasn't any way to do it without Gage standing there. She would have to wait until they put the trash on the curb for pickup and dig through it, until the bloody bandages were just one more nugget of information to file away for later. As they walked through the bedroom area, she looked at the uncomfortable beds again and glanced at Gage. "Do you spend much time here?" He gave her a wry smile on their way down to the stairs. "Unfortunately, I wasn't kidding when I said we have a lot of paperwork. I stay here 2 or 3 nights a week just trying to keep up with it." "Huh. Guess that answered the question as to whether he had a girlfriend. She already knew from his personnel file that he wasn't married, but with work hours like this, it was safe to assume he wasn't seeing anyone, at least not regularly." They ran into Diego Martinez on their way out of the building. He was carrying what looked like a footlocker on his shoulder. The thing had to weigh 70 pounds easy, but he made it look like it was nothing. Maybe his injury hadn't been as bad as it looked, or the designer drug he might be taking made him impervious to pain as well as super strong. This drug that she's concocting in her head keeps sounding dumber and dumber as she goes. As Gage made the introductions, she searched for signs that Martinez was juicing, but his eyes weren't dilated, his hands weren't shaking, and his skin wasn't cold and clammy. If he was taking drugs, it was the type that didn't have any visible side effects. Wait, these guys are cops. Don't cops have, like, drug tests and all those other things that go on? Wouldn't someone have picked up on this? She pointed to a series of buildings as they crossed the back of the compound. "What are those?" Gage followed her gaze. "We use those to simulate different tactical scenarios. We can practice climbing, rappelling, sorry. I'll never get that word right. Going through windows, breaching doors, explosive entry, pretty much anything we want." As they got closer, Mac realized that what she thought was buildings were actually facades, like something on a Hollywood movie set. Gage gave her a tour describing the different kinds of things the team used for them in detail. Even though she kept telling herself she was only there to look for evidence of some wrongdoing, she couldn't help but be fascinated by the training he and his men did. She almost wished she were writing a fluff piece on them. She found herself standing a lot closer to Gage than necessary, too, and it had nothing to do with her trying to play him. She might be a journalist, but she was a woman, too. Is she a woman? And she couldn't deny she was flat out attracted to Gage. Hell, she wasn't sure there were many women in the world who wouldn't be attracted to the man. She knew she should fight it, but she didn't. Instead, she put her covert mission on hold and gave herself permission to have fun. He was one of those rare people who could talk about anything she brought up, including local and national politics. Okay. She was floored he knew the names and agendas of every political mover and shaker, not only in Texas, but on the national level and in Mexico, too. Before long, they were talking about topics that had nothing to do with SWAT, cops, or even journalism, and she was enjoying the heck out of it. So he watches the news? Mac didn't even realize how much time had passed until she noticed they toured at least a dozen training buildings, an obstacle course, a climbing tower that was way too high, in her opinion, 2 short ranges, and a beach volleyball court of all things. The next thing she knew, they had done a whole circuit of the SWAT training grounds and were heading back toward the admin building. But instead of taking her there, Gage led her to a 1-floor building without any windows. More storage, maybe. "Last stop on the tour. I figured you might want to take a look at our armory." Gage flashed her again. "No offense, but it's been my experience that reporters seem to have an unhealthy fascination with the weapons SWAT uses for some reason." She smiled up at him. "No offense taken, since I'm a journalist, not a reporter." "What's the difference?" "About $30,000 a year." He chuckled, but didn't say anything as he opened the door for her. The building was a welcome relief for the blistering temperatures outside, and Mac pushed her sunglasses up on her head. A police officer behind the counter that blocked their entry into the back half of the building looked up when they entered. "This is Senior Corporal Trevor McCall," Gage said. "Beyond his normal SWAT duties, he's also our senior armorer. He maintains and repairs all of our weapons, modifying them when needed. McCall, meet Mackenzie Stone." She shook hands with the officer, marveling that there was just another hot, muscular guy. She didn't realize it was even statistically possible for that many attractive men to be in one space. This had to be a record or something. Oh, come on. Couldn't they have given him at least one average-looking dude? I mean, everybody has to be, like, smoldering, devastatingly fucking handsome. I mean, really? Oh, God. "Come on back, and I'll give you a grand tour," McCall said. Gage waited for her to walk around the counter, then followed. There were actually 2 doors between them and the room where the weapons were kept. The first was made out of a wire material, while the other was solid metal door. Big safes and cabinets lined each wall, along with several shelves with storage bins. The men led her around the room, pulling out weapons and explaining what they were, how they worked, and what the SWAT team used them for. Mac had seen quite a few weapons, from the pistols the gang members in Dallas carried to the assault rifles and machine guns the cartel drug runners used, but she wasn't an expert, and she quickly got lost in all the details as Gage and McCall explained the differences between this carbine and that rifle. Okay. If I was a journalist and I kind of specialized in writing about cartels, gangs, dangerous entities, I would probably want to fucking educate myself on the types of weapons they used because I don't want to get shot. Like this woman is writing a book about a reporter, or a journalist, I'm sorry, who's so, all about getting to the bottom of each story. But then she doesn't bother to get into details. Like, the reporter, Mackenzie, doesn't know anything. It's like she's so... There's no foundation to how great of a writer she is. Because they keep telling us that she's, the best of the best of the best. But when it comes to her internal dialogue and gathering knowledge, she sucks ass. She could barely recognize the difference. Then they started showing her all the shotguns they stored in the various safes and really confused her. All the numbers started spinning around in her head like bees. 3. Okay, so I suck at reading out guns, so I apologize. But I was told that you don't say the point. So the 380, 40, 357, 38, 9mm, 10mm, and those were just the ones she caught in passing. Hang on, she said, holding her hand up. Why do you need so many different sizes of guns? Are you guys hoarders or something? Both men laughed. You might be onto something, McCall agreed. We've picked up most of them over the years, but hardly ever shoot them. Most of us use SIG 9mm or 40 calibers for both our primary and backup weapons, but I've always thought it was a good idea to be as familiar as possible with as many different weapons as we can, Gage added. You never know when it might come in handy. They showed her a couple of their favorites, letting her hold them so she could get a feel for their heft and balance. Gage eyed her curiously. You have much experience firing a handgun? She shook her head. Not really. I've only fired a gun once. My dad let me shoot his pistol when I was 12. She pointed at the big, heavy revolver she'd been holding. It was about the same size as that one. Scared the hell out of me, and I dropped it. That was the last time he let me try. Why would you let a 12-year-old shoot such a big gun, a heavy gun, for the first time? Her father's a friggin' idiot. Gage frowned. A gun that size isn't made for someone with small hands, much less a kid. She couldn't argue with that. While she loved her dad, he wasn't the most patient teacher in the world, which was ironic considering what it was he did for a living. If he knew how to do something, he just assumed everyone else should be smart enough to know how to do it too. Luckily, he taught English literature and not a weapons class. Gage said, his dark eyes softening. If you want to try again, I could show you how to shoot a gun you'd be more comfortable with. I don't think I've ever, looked at someone and said their eyes softened towards me, or... I'm trying to think, these kinds of examples, if in real life I've experienced them, and maybe I'm just not observant. If you want to try again, I can show you how to shoot a gun you'd be more comfortable with. Max smiled. That sounds fun. Gage smiled at her in return, and she realized after a bit that she was just standing there with a goofy grin on her face. She tucked a loose strand of her hair behind her ear, looking away, and caught McCall looking at them expectantly. That does sound fun. It took her a second to remember that they'd been talking about. That's right, target shooting. We can all get the guys out there. It'll be a blast. Gage scowled at him, but didn't say anything. Mac wandered around while Gage and McCall put away the weapons they'd dragged out. That was when she saw the hard plastic cases stacked on shelves inside a heavy-duty wire storage bin. She smiled at Gage over her shoulder. You guys have more guns in there? What, you run out of cabinets and safes to hold them? Gage glanced at her as he closed one of the safes. Those are our night vision goggles. Mac's spidey senses immediately began to tingle. Like the ones you guys used during the hostage rescue today? They sound cool. Can I see them? Sure. Gage took the set of keys McCall held out and opened the gate. He grabbed the first box he came to and opened it, but not before she saw the name of the SWAT officers the goggles belonged to. Mike Taylor. The same Mike Taylor who had supposedly worn them that morning. But from the layer of dust in the top of the case, it hadn't been opened in a while, much less earlier today. I would have thought you'd leave those leave these in your response truck, she said as she handed him the goggles. Gage didn't answer right away. In her experience, that usually meant whatever a person said after that would be a lie. They're expensive, he said, so we keep them locked up in here in the cage between incidents. Uh-huh. These are PS-14 military grade NVGs, Gage told her. They run about $4,000 a pop, but worth every penny. She only half listened as he explained how to wear the goggles and turn them on, mostly because she was focused on trying to figure out what to make of this new piece of information. Obviously, they hadn't worn NVGs, as Gage called them, on the hostage rescue that morning, but why not? Because the drug they were taking allowed them to see so well in the dark that they didn't need NVGs? But that was too stupid for words. Thank you. When you come by to go target shooting, you can try out a pair of these, Gage said as he put the goggles back in the case. She nodded. Sounds like a plan. They could have come out a bit more enthusiastic. That could have come out a bit more enthusiastic. But she was still trying to wrap her mind around why a SWAT team would leave a critical piece of equipment behind when they went on a call. Maybe they'd forgotten to bring them. If so, Gage and his men weren't dirty, just stupid. And that didn't explain why they'd been able to see in pitch-black buildings. Matt gave McCall a wave as they walked out. Damn, the sun was already starting to set. She looked at her watch and saw that she and Gage had been walking around for almost 4 hours, and while she definitely enjoyed herself, maybe a lot more than she should have, she hadn't gotten anything solid to go on. She'd been so distracted by his charm, tight t-shirt, and amazing good looks, she'd barely asked any of the questions she'd planned. The SWAT commander had handled her with ease, guiding the conversation and keeping her off her game for most of the afternoon. The only thing she could say for sure was that while she didn't have a clue how all the strange tidbits of information she'd collected were connected, she was even more certain there was a story here. But how was she going to get her hands on it? Her day with Gage and his SWAT team was about to come to an end, and she wasn't sure if the return was in the plans, regardless of the casual invitation to do some target shooting. I hope I didn't bore you much, Gage said when they reached the gate. I couldn't help notice that you weren't interested in what I was saying about the NVGs. Not that I blame you. It's pretty dry stuff. Mac felt her face heat. She hadn't realized he'd seen her zone out. I wasn't bored. I was just a little distracted, that's all. Distracted, huh? His smile was so knowing that for a moment she thought he was onto her. Why is that? Damn, he was making this almost too easy. Well, she gave him a sheepish look. I was thinking about the fact that I sort of fibbed to you a little while before. Fibbed about what? Despite the way he crossed his arms over his chest to show off those exceptional biceps and pecs of his, he didn't seem angry or even mildly annoyed. Being here for an in-depth story about a day in the life of a SWAT officer, she said slowly. His eyes narrowed. Then why are you here? Now came the really tricky part. Straying too far from the truth could get her in trouble, but she couldn't be too honest either. Usually that didn't bother her if it meant getting a story, but in this case it did. Mac ignored her guilty conscience and pushed ahead. Might have sent me to confirm a rumor he'd heard about the SWAT team. What rumor is that? She felt another twinge of remorse and immediately squashed it. This next part wasn't really a lie, not completely anyway, that your team is using performance-enhancing drugs. Gage didn't say anything. Instead, he regarded her with those beautiful dark eyes of his. Crap. What if she tried a little too close to the truth? Why does every book we've read so far have the word crap in it? But then he smiled that gorgeous smile. Since you're telling me this, I assume you don't believe it? She moved a little closer, letting her arm brush against his. The brief contact made her body tingle all the way to her toes, and she quickly stepped back. He was supposed to be the one getting flustered, not her. Of course not, she said when she finally found her voice, but my boss is going to need more to go on than my assurances, especially since I've only spent a few hours with you. He considered that. I can see how that might be a problem. Any idea how it can convince you the rumors are wrong? She threw him a quick glance from under her lashes to see if he caught onto her game yet. I've always wondered what it looks like when you looked at someone under their lashes, and I've tried. It's very hard, unless you have, giant lashes. But his face gave nothing away. I thought I could hang out the compound for a few days, maybe watch the SWAT team train. Then your editor would be more likely to believe you when you told him you thoroughly checked everything out and concluded that none of us is using PEDs. Gage finished for her. She grinned. Exactly. Gage didn't return her smile. I wish I could okay something like that, but the department has policies against giving a journalist complete access to the unit. Damn. Isn't there anything we can do to work around this policy? He thought a moment. I suppose I could tell the department we've been planning this story for a while, and that I'm okay with you hanging out with us to write it. You do that for me? Sure, he said. I think we should spend a little more time talking about what you have in mind for your story before I agree, though. Say over dinner tonight, if you're free? Okay, she hadn't expected that. Not that she minded going out with the handsome SWAT commander. In fact, she should have thought of it herself. What better way to get Gage to open up than over an intimate dinner for two? Max smiled. As a matter of fact, I am. Boy, this chapter is long. Or it feels long. Gage heard two men come up behind him as he watched Mackenzie Stone walk back to her car. He didn't have to turn around to notice Mike and Xander, and he didn't have to look at them to pick up on their disapproval. You know she was playing you the whole time, right? Xander said. She's not here because she thinks we're on steroids. Her heart was beating too fast when she said it. She was lying. Gage didn't answer. Instead, he watched Mackenzie bend over to move something around in the back seat of the car. Damn, she had an amazing ass. You could stand there and gaze at it all day. As she straightened and closed the back door, he admitted her butt wasn't her only amazing asset. She was supermodel beautiful. Of course she is. With long, shining hair, curves in all the right places, and a killer smile that could make a man do stupid things. He was going to have to be extra careful around her. Mackenzie might not look it, but she was dangerous, and it wasn't only because Xander had been right about her lying to him. He dragged himself away from the picture of the female perfection on the other side of the fence and turned back to look at Xander. How'd it go with IA? He might have been occupied with Mackenzie all day, but that didn't mean he'd forgotten his senior squad leader was downtown getting grilled, while Xander didn't come back until 30 minutes ago. While Gage was worried about a reporter like Mackenzie Stone finding out the entire SWAT team was made up of werewolves, AI was a bigger threat. They had details on every arrest the team made and raid they'd done. If anyone was going to connect the dots, it'd be internal affairs. It went fine, Xander said. They just asked me to go over my story again and again. Usually that means that they're looking to catch me in a lie, but they didn't act as if I did anything wrong or say anything to make me think they were suspicious about something. Tell him about the lawyer, Mike said. Gage fine. They had a lawyer there? Yeah, that was definitely weird, Xander said. They had a city lawyer there listening to everything I said. He even asked for clarification a few times. I didn't say I could go until he was okay. He gave the okay. Gage didn't like the sound of that. I didn't say why he was there. Xander shook his head. Not a thing. But since they didn't say anything to make me think I'm in trouble, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm damn worried about that reporter, though. I know she was lying, but I expected that. It didn't mean Gage liked it, though. Whether she lied or doesn't change, whether she lied or not doesn't change anything. I'll keep an eye on her and make sure she doesn't discover anything that can cause a problem. Mike's face looked skeptical. Why not just say Mike looked skeptical? You think you can honestly keep her snooping under control? She seems like a handful, if you ask me. Understatement there. I think so. You think so? Xander repeated. Not exactly the confident answer I was looking for. Confidence can be a bad thing when you're dealing with a woman like Mackenzie Stone, Gage said. She's not only smart, she's persistent, and she has better instincts than any person I've met. She might not have a clue we're werewolves, but she knows there's something going on. Mike frowned. What makes you say that? Because her heart sped up like crazy when she was looking at the night vision goggles in the armory. The NVGs? Mike looked as confused as Gage felt. Why would she care about those? Gage shrugged. I don't know, but it's part of a reason I asked her out to dinner. I have to figure out what she knows, or thinks she knows. And to do that, I need to get her somewhere where she'll relax and lower her guard. I have to get the upper hand in this situation, and fast. Uh-huh. That knowing grin from earlier was back on Mike's face. And what's the other part? Other part? Yeah, you said finding out that she knows what she knows was only part of the reason you asked her out for dinner. Any chance the other part might have something to do with how hard you were staring at Miss Stone's fiery fine ass? Gage opened his mouth to deny it, but it'd be useless. Werewolves knew when one of their own found a woman attractive. They could sense it like they sensed everything else. Mike had picked up on it the moment he'd seen Gage and Mackenzie together. Okay, admit, Mackenzie is attractive, and that might have something to do with asking her out to dinner, he added when Mike lifted his brow. What, you don't think I can have a good time with her and still take care of the pack? We'd like to think you can, but we'd have to be blind not to see the effect she has on you, Xander said. God, these fucking men. Gage clenched his jaw. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Xander looked for Mike for help, but he just shrugged. I mean, that it seems like she might be the one for you is all. The one. Capital T, capital O. Gage snorted. Really? Oh my god. You know I don't believe in that crap. Mackenzie smells great, but that doesn't mean she has some psychic ability to control my mind. Oh, Jesus. Maybe not, Mike agreed with a laugh, but that doesn't mean she can't control the rest of you. Funny, Gage chuckled, but maybe you get a hard-on every time you're around a woman who showers more than once a week, but my standards are a little higher. It was Mike's turn to snort. You mean like a beautiful face, long silky hair, an awesome ass, and legs up to there? Because I couldn't help but notice that Miss Stone has that going on, too. Gage growled and stepped toward Mike before he even realized what he was doing. This book is on my nook. If it wasn't on my nook, I would have fucking tossed it across the room. Just the thought that his squad leader had been checking out Mackenzie's ass bothered him way more than it should have. Fortunately, Xander quickly stepped between them. Look, Gage, we're not saying there's anything wrong with her being the one, if that's what she is, Xander said. The problem is that she's a reporter who wouldn't waste a second telling the whole world if she discovered our secret. The whole idea was ridiculous, but Xander hadn't been a werewolf as long as he and Mike had. He was still young enough to believe the urban legend that every werewolf had a single mate out there, and that once he found her, everything would be right with the world. That was bullshit made up by some desperate young werewolves as a way to make themselves feel better about the fact that they could never make things work with a human woman. She's not the one, Gage forced himself not to sound too bitter. For all he knew, Xander was one of those werewolves who hoped and prayed for the legend to be true. And even if she was, it wouldn't matter. Protecting the pack is my first priority. Even if she stumbles on our secret? Mike asked. That was a question Gage didn't know how to answer. When he'd convinced Mike, Xander, and the others to come to Dallas and join a team where they wouldn't have to hide their identities from each other, he promised to keep their secret, and for 8 years he'd been true to his word. The minute they thought he couldn't, they'd be gone, and he couldn't let that happen, not after all he'd been through to get them where they are now. She won't, he finally said. But if she does, Xander insisted. Gage met his squad leader's gaze. Then I'll do whatever I have to protect the pack. I got nothing to add. I'll see you guys tomorrow.